Same dude, different day. Chapter 10. Where is my husband? Being single must only be fun when you're a slut. After my relationship with Q backfired, the idea of dating became less amusing. Immediately after dealing with Q and his psycho baby mama, I decided to jump back on the celibacy horse. Figured I owed it to myself to give it another try. The first year was extremely uncomfortable, gut-wrenching even. Q had awakened my sexual taste buds, so an entire year without any intimate male interactions seemed like cruel and unusual punishment. I deactivated my social media accounts and stayed to myself for a while. If I were to be successful at this whole no sex thing, I had to eliminate all possible distractions. The slightest form of flattery would be sure to make me revert to my old ways. I longed for affection and knew that letting my flesh win would lead to my ultimate demise. During my season of hiding, I convinced myself that my newly found lifestyle would yield a relationship very soon. After a little more time passed, I began to reactivate my accounts and slowly emerge back on the social scene. I had given up my promiscuous ways and was now ready for my ward. I was ready to begin actively dating, but my heart wasn't. My trust issues were standing in the way of my full recovery. During my quest to get back in the swing of things, I met a couple of guys here and there, but I had stopped saving their numbers in my phone. I had the tendency to unblock people after I had claimed to permanently remove them from my life. I had unblocked both Courtney and Q, only to realize the trauma was much deeper the second time around. I couldn't put myself through that again, so I had to develop a new strategy. Now they had to prove themselves to me before securing a spot in my contact list. When I first met a guy, I didn't know his intentions and was unsure of what purpose he would have in my life. Therefore, I did not give him a position that he did not deserve. If things went wrong, all I needed to do was erase the text message thread and suddenly he would disappear as if he never existed. And when he tried to sneak back into my life like nothing happened, I can honestly be like, who this? Because I genuinely had no record of him in my phone. It gave me such joy to detach myself from these random individuals. My sister hated this habit that I had developed. She also said that I gave up on people too easily because I would leave as soon as I saw one suspect move. She believed that by not saving people's numbers in my phone, I was speaking defeat into existence. My sister felt like I was subconsciously saying that the person didn't deserve to be in my life, and that's why they always ended up leaving. I could understand her point of view, but I had become accustomed to the defense mechanisms. Being able to let guys know that they were never really that important to me was empowering, but my sense of empowerment would quickly fade upon entering my next relationship. Time flew by, and it was time to celebrate my birthday. My girls and I hopped on a flight to Jamaica in hopes of finding a vacation bay. However, our travel agent booked us at what seemed like a retirement home resort. A bunch of older people surrounded me and my friends. We arrived at the pool in thong bikinis ready to turn up. Meanwhile, the senior citizens were doing water aerobics while listening to the music that played when the Titanic sank. It wasn't the type of environment that encouraged enjoyment of any kind, but I still tried to make the best out of it. My suitcase was filled with enticing attire, and I paraded around my social media timeline as bait. If the guys couldn't come to me, I'd go to them electronically. Shortly after showcasing myself in my swimsuit, several men were whispering sweet nothings in my DMs. Among them was this guy that I had been crushing on since college. We were originally supposed to reconnect at CJ's wedding, but he made a last minute adjustment to his schedule and our plans fell through. It was probably for the best though, because I knew he would throw me off my game. His DM said, "Hey, it's my wife's birthday. Happy birthday, baby." His message was accompanied by several heart eye emojis, but the word wife was what significantly grabbed my attention. That word was my kryptonite, especially since I was now in my 30s. For some reason, society had negatively stamped unmarried women over the age of 30 as old maids. Embarrassed and insecure that I had yet to meet society's standards, I'd often allow myself to rush towards love even though the red flags were present. The slightest hint of marriage threw all my common sense out the window. He hadn't contacted me in over a year. That should have let me know that I was very low on his list of priorities. I should have also been leery that he had backed out on performing at my friend's wedding without the proper notice. That situation didn't speak highly of his character, but I chose to have temporary amnesia and ignore all the warning signs. His DM indicated that he saw me as his wife, and I was willing to do anything to turn his words into reality. His sexy curly hair and salt and pepper beard distracted me as well, so he gave me his new number and we began a new journey together. I wouldn't have saved his number in my phone, but I wanted to take heed of my sister's advice. She was married and I wasn't. It was best that I followed the blueprint she had left for me. I saved his number in my phone as husband, merging husband and bae in hopes that it would be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Conversing with him throughout the day became a part of my daily routine. We spent several hours on the phone revealing the details of the crush we had on each other for the past several years. Husband told me that he had always felt rejected by me. He claimed that he tried to approach me several times, but I refused to give him a chance. Honestly, I always thought he was a player. He was an entertainer, and his smooth voice caused him to become very popular. His lifestyle yielded a bunch of groupies, and I had no desire to be a part of his following. If we were going to be together, I needed to be number one, not one of many. So I ignored him because I never thought he was serious. I feared he was unable to be in a committed relationship, so I refrained from even opening that door. But now he was ready, and so was I. The more we talked, the more I felt a growing bond with him. We had the same views on religion, family, and money. Everything seemed effortless until feelings got involved. During one of our daily conversations, I strategically asked him, "Babe, if you had to describe your love life using a song, what would that song be?" I was falling for this man, but I dare not come right out and say it, so I tried to finesse the conversation to see if he felt the same way. Secretly, I was hoping that he'd choose Beyonce's Crazy in Love or Drake's Best I Ever Had. You got me sprung and I don't care who sees, or baby, you're my everything, you're all I ever wanted, were the verses that I wanted to come to his mind when he thought about me. Or, since he was an artist, I expected him to write me an original love song that would showcase his feelings. After a long pause, he shared that the song he most identified with was Heartbreaker by Tank. I had never heard that song before, but judging from the title, I knew he had a wall up and I was now responsible for breaking it down. I had to know what I was up against, so I listened to the song. The lyrics were as follows: "Baby girl, tell me how again I'm supposed to trust you now after everything you admitted to me. And I'm sitting here trying to find a way to forget somehow because I'm feeling like you cut me too deep. Girl, I blame myself because I told you to lay it on the line. Never thought you would lay it that way. Never thought you had so much to say. Never thought I'd see the day where we almost crossed the line between love and hate. Are you sure you told me everything? Even though it hurts, I'm trying to take it like a man and halfway understand. Being hurt wasn't a part of the plan." So now I'm tripping because that was only the first stanza of the song. My heart bled for him as I listened to the rest of the song, thoroughly examining the lyrics. After an intense conversation, I realized the song accurately depicted a situation from his past. He had been cheated on by his first love, and his relationships hadn't been the same ever since. His trust issues were surprisingly deeper than mine. I didn't think that that was humanly possible, but it was. Now, I was in charge of breaking down the walls that we had both put up, then using those bricks to build a solid foundation for us. That would not be an easy task. Note to self: when someone ghosts you, don't try to resurrect them. Husband ghosted me for about 2 weeks after he revealed his broken heart to me. I tried to be understanding because I knew it took a lot out of him for him to open up about his heartache. It still didn't make me feel good to be left alone, though. I wanted to talk to him and to let him know that I had his back no matter what. It's hard to let someone know how much you care when they don't return your phone calls. 2 weeks with no conversation turned my sympathy into rage. She and I were not the same, yet he was making me pay for her mistakes. I was having a hard time coping with husband's silence, so fortunately, my friend had a game night that helped me get him off my mind. Even though I was still very much hung up on husband, I managed to pick up a stray by the end of the game night. One of my friend's guests had been flirting with me all night, so I allowed him to take me out. While the new guy and I were at dinner, a familiar yet infrequent name popped up on my caller ID. I excused myself from the dinner table and rushed to the restroom to answer. Husband just picked up where he left off as if nothing had happened. That was the first sign of his bipolar tendencies. I couldn't understand how he went from all that wife talk to not speaking to me for weeks. I was not okay with it, but dared not to start an argument, especially since I was so glad that we were back together. While on the phone with him, I just left the restaurant without even saying goodbye to my date. I needed the new guy to be so mad at me that he would never contact me again. And I couldn't tell husband that I was on a date. He already didn't trust me because of his ex's mistakes. I couldn't have him not trust me because of mine as well. The whole situation was shady, but I had to do what I had to do to protect our love. We needed to connect on a deeper level, so I decided to invite him into my past. I told him about how Xavier had taken my heart, stomped on it, and used the broken pieces to make dangling earrings. The purpose of telling him about Xavier was to assure him that I would never intentionally cause him pain because I too had been hurt before. He needed to know that we were in this together. Some mama's boys only have room for one woman in their life. Each day we became closer. The more we shared, the more in sync we became. Husband mentioned he was planning on moving to Georgia at the end of the year. He felt there was more opportunity in Atlanta to advance his singing career. My heart filled with joy as we started the virtual house hunting process. He was willing to give up everything he had built in his hometown to move and rebuild something special with me. The end of the year couldn't come fast enough. I couldn't wait to reunite with him. Things moved quickly, and husband introduced me to his mom one day when we were on FaceTime. His mom was a sweet lady. She spoke highly of her son, but I left the conversation feeling as though he might be a bit of a mama's boy. She appeared to be fond of me, but I never got a chance to confirm because he became unreachable again. Maybe she didn't feel like I was worthy of being with her son and encouraged him to stop talking to me. Or perhaps I was the first woman he had introduced to his mother since his ex-girlfriend, and that frightened him. Either way, the uncertainty was aggravating to me. My anxiety was through the roof. I chose not to gravitate towards another man this time because I knew he would be back. A couple of days had passed and he was still a no-call, no-show. Worry tried to attack my spirit, but my faith in us sustained me. When he finally returned to me, I had questions. Although I felt strongly about us, I needed to know that he felt the same way about me. If we weren't an item, I needed to pick up my pride and let him be. However, if we were indeed a we, I desperately needed to know why he continuously chose to do life without me. Note to self: believe in their actions, not their vocabulary. When I asked him what we were, he replied, "God sent you to me. You already know who you are to me." Now, why did he have to lie on God like that? His reply was served with a hearty serving of manipulation, and I gobbled it up like it was my last supper. Husband's used car salesman charade worked on me like a charm. I piled the inconsistency and false hopes of marriage and everything else into the mystical, luxury hoopty his words sold me and rode happily off into the sunset. In my eyes, his words were gold, and I made myself believe him no matter the price. Lacking wisdom, I continued to have faith in our fabricated fairy tale. My interactions with him were toxic, but I chose only to see the best in him. When things were good, they were good. When communication was consistent, we learned so many new things about each other. It's amazing how much we had in common. Conversely, stubbornness and pettiness were among one of the many things we shared. We'd often have a hard time finding a middle ground. Since we often couldn't see eye to eye, instead of trying to communicate like mature adults, we played mind games as if we were teenagers. For example, instead of him telling me that he was no longer interested in moving forward with the relationship, he'd send me subliminals. One day, he told me that he had poor taste in women. Another day, he talked about how his lifestyle was so demanding and how he could never find a woman dope enough to handle it. I felt as though he was trying to foreshadow our relationship. He wasn't fooling nobody because I used this tactic before in the past as well. It was my best way to exit a complicated situation. I would let my unsuspecting lover know the less flattering things about my personality in hopes that they would just leave. Instead of being an adult and breaking up with them face to face, I'd make them aware of all my imperfections and encourage them to retreat. Although we were both toxic, our sexual attraction for one another seemed to bypass all the signs that were yelling for us to abort the mission. We were hundreds of miles away from each other, so he often suggests that we satisfy our physical needs in an alternative way. One day, he headed to his studio to play me one of his latest songs. His voice flowed through the phone and caressed every part of my body. When he sang to me, I was putty in his hands. Hanging on to his every word, we decided to take our conversation to FaceTime. He propped his phone up on one of his musical instruments. He needed his hands to be free for what he planned to do next. A little hesitant at first, I just bit my lip and enjoyed the show. Unable to contain my excitement, I quickly became an active participant. Phone sex didn't count as real sex, did it? It didn't to me, so I was content in knowing that my new round of celibacy was still intact. However, throughout our relationship, I began to feel a little more convicted about having phone sex because it became more frequent than regular phone calls. Note to self: make him give you a title or make yourself unavailable. After I declined an invitation for yet another sexual video chat, Husband dusted off his magical wand and pulled another disappearing act. This time he was only unavailable for 2 or 3 days, but this time it was 2 or 3 days too long. I was done. No longer did I have time to try to piece together a deteriorating relationship. My feelings for him were deep. Deep. But to survive, I needed to let him go. His excuses were repetitive and no longer enough. He always blamed his absence on his career, and when that didn't work, he began to blame me. He claimed that I was the one ghosting him. He falsely accused me of not calling and not texting, and he claimed that he was just matching my energy. I sent screenshots of my call log and text history as proof. I had reached out to him several times during his sabbatical to no avail. Instead of admitting that he was wrong, he told me that I was childish and I was incapable of having an adult conversation. According to him, adults should be able to effectively express themselves without sending screenshots. He was certified crazy. Somehow, my proof of his lack of participation in our relationship transformed into my level of pettiness and inability to discuss issues properly. I had a boatload of screenshots in my arsenal that could have further proven my point, but I deemed them unnecessary to send. We were over, so there was no need to prolong the inevitable. I asked him to stop calling me, but he wouldn't listen. I heard from this dude more when we had broken up than when we were together. Eventually, I added him to the infamous block list with the rest of the time wasters. He needed to know that he couldn't just pick me up and drop me off whenever he felt like it. This ain't KinderCare. If he wanted me, his actions needed to be aligned. But then, true to form, a couple of weeks after I blocked him, I began to miss him. I had too much pride to remove him from my block phone list, so I turned to social media to get his attention. Shortly after posting my picture, his name and more heart eye emojis popped up in my DMs again. I now hated the heart eye emoji, and I wanted it to die a slow and agonizing death. I felt like it was taunting me. Those were the same emojis husband used when he made that whole wife comment. It was also the same emoji he used when he would return from his frequent leaves of absence. Now he chose to use that same emoji to communicate with me instead of apologizing and sealing his apology with changed behavior. His DM was left unanswered. I hoped that my silence would convey that I was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If he wanted to be with me, he had to be willing to work for it. Over the next several months, he continued to DM me, but none of his words offered reassurance to our recovery. Often, I wouldn't respond because I wanted him to know how it felt to want to speak to someone and not be able to reach them. After several unanswered messages, he stated that he felt as though I no longer cared. His assumptions were correct. I guess I had left all my cares in the same place that he left my relationship title. He had never officially made it clear if we were in a committed relationship, but a 4-letter word gave me blind allegiance to him. I desperately wanted to be a wife, so I completely ignored all the consistent inconsistencies in our communication. I hoped that my patience would inspire a significant change in him, which would lead to a fruitful relationship. 2 willing participants were needed for that to happen, and neither one of us was up for the task. Eventually, the messages stopped, and so did my expectations of him and anything he had to offer. He used to make me feel like $1,000,000, but when it was all said and done, I felt like a bag of unrolled pennies. Abstaining from my ex-husband was painfully difficult, but it was necessary. One phone call from him would have made me stupid all over again. So I was relieved that I had blocked his access to me. Although I knew we'd be better apart, there was still a part of me that wondered if we could ever get that old thing back. I had plans to visit the Midwest soon to welcome my nephew into the world and pondered on having him meet up with me while I was in town. Then it dawned on me that if he didn't even come visit me while we were slightly together, he wouldn't come see me if we weren't. The distance hurt us, especially since physical touch was both of our love languages. Maybe if he could have followed through with his plans to move to Atlanta, things would have turned out differently. The foolish parts of me wanted to believe this to be true, but the little bit of saneness I had left encouraged me to seek spiritual guidance. Except for my false pregnancy debacle, I had never prayed that hard in my life. Desperate for answers, I cried out to God, asking Him for a sign. Now, here's the thing about God that sometimes ticks me off. When I ask Him for little things that I believe will be super easy for Him to do, like give me a small waistline, He'd laugh in my face. Oh, but no, when I asked Him about this guy, He bombarded me with several scenarios to encourage my exit. I swear it was like as soon as I uttered the last words of my prayer, all the toxic situations began to flood my memory. The rumors of him messing around with a married woman while we were in college moved to the forefront of my brain. If that weren't enough to deter me, I also remember that he had smashed one of my good friends back in the day. It was a one night stand, and him and her both assured me that it meant nothing. However, I was still kind of close with this friend, so it made the situation extremely awkward for me. All the signs were pointing towards the exit. These situations didn't speak very well on his behalf, but I too had a very dark past, and I felt like it was unfair for me to judge him. Both of those scenarios had happened before we chose to deal with each other, so I tried to forgive his past mistakes and hoped that we could secure a promising future. God was sure to remind me that even though those unpleasant moments happened in the past, our current situation was full of buffoonery as well. I was quickly reminded of how unwanted I felt when he would just leave for days and sometimes weeks. His abandonment didn't stop there. During our very last conversation, I told him that I loved him. My statement was misguided, but it was sincere. The proper response would have been, I love you too, or something similar. Instead, he chose to tell me that I was too controlling and needed to stop rushing things. If that wasn't a slap in my face begging me to move on, I don't know what was.